if we see a modern day Hitler, it would be someone in America who was talking about immigrants and removing immigrants. That would be the Hitler platform. So if we see somebody burn down the fucking Congress and march down the street with a mega army supported by groups of people, mostly white, who are against the immigrants, this is a scenario.
You think it'll be a race war?
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
Yo, what's up, Internet? Welcome back to another episode of 3 Averagely Intelligent Dudes, and today we're discussing dangerous ideas.
As always,
and a whole lot of dangerous ideas today. It was one of those kind of grab bag episodes where we really just riffed off a good topic and ran it into about 3 or 4 other good topics.
Quite a few hypotheticals.
Yeah. We ran some thought experiments. You're gonna have a really good time with this conversation. Let us know in the comments what your favorite topic was, and let's get right into it.
In America, how many steps are we away from a complete de-evolution of how our society works? Like, how many replica apps and you know what I mean, Astro World, if it's like just all this crazy shit. Like we have like you were saying earlier, it feels like a time of change, like a very transitional period. You know, how many more things until America is like irrecoverable in the way that it currently is? Because
that's the place I don't like to take it, though. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean,
I try not to be that guy who's
this is why I was like, my whole perspective on this is total white pill. Like, I'm totally optimistic about like 99% of everything that we've talked about here. Like, I don't see it in like a negative light. No. So like, I don't really feel like any of this is leading us to.
I can't help but feel that
falling under. Like, I feel like more like. I feel like our population is growing, and I feel like the percentage of the population of people that are just kind of like being schooled around and like herded like cattle is like higher than it's ever been. Other than maybe like in, I don't know, like monarchy medieval times when you could just like literally pick a, you know, like we're moving all of you people. But like, I think that it's just so, like, what makes it worse now is maybe that it's just so subtle. Like, back in the day, like, you could be like, the damn king's kicking us out or whatever. Like, you knew what was happening. They told you what was going on. Like, we're going to be doing something else on this part of the land, so you can't farm here anymore. Get the fuck out. It's like, oh, damn. Like, it still sucks, but it's like, you know what's going on. Now, you have no idea what the fuck's going on. Everybody's subverting you from left and right, and it's all fucking mishmash. So, like, I can see how, like, it seems bad, but I always have, like, this... Like, it's just like this undying, like, belief in people. Like, I just feel like we'll figure it out. Like, that's why I'm not, like, afraid of, like, climate change or whatever. Like, I'm sure we'll figure something out.
Well, I think
we won't.
I think us figuring out is going to be when basically the military takes over our government, declares martial law, shoots some people in the street, and gets order again after our shit goes chaos for a couple months or something. Because I really do feel like we're like the transitional phase for America is a sharp decline that could, if not properly dealt with in a timely period, like I point at replica kind of as like a look how fucked up this is. This is a weird fucked up thing for our society. It's like, stay by yourself and interact with this thing that doesn't really exist. That's gonna just give you what you want to hear.
Plug into the Matrix, plug into the metaverse. You know, like all these different types of things. Technology has not really necessarily been good to us so far.
And I'm not trying to go crazy Ted Kaczynski, but I'm in that vein of like, it's gonna come to a head. Like, this is a wave that will crest, fall, and crash. And if we don't understand how to live in this in this new world, this new metaverse, this new with digital currencies and blockchains, if we just keep getting manipulated by the hate machine, if the propaganda hate machine just keeps pushing us into division until, look at our politics. Like, I know we've had bad politics before, but God, they're ugly. They're ugly and they're contentious. This is
what I was talking about
earlier. They're polar in the sense that they just... They feel it's almost like the Confederacy.
But is it worse now than it's ever been?
I don't think that one particular politics thing is. But I think when you couple it with all the other things in the chain of events, it's, yeah, we don't have a war right now, but that's about the only thing we got going for us.
But you know how, like, that's what I'm saying is, like, everybody has always thought the Mayans tried to predict the end of civilization thousands of years ago. Like, humans have always tried to predict the end of the world. Like, it's in saying, like, yo, something bad's about to happen. Something bad's about to happen. Yo, we're going to shit. We're going to shit. And it's always like that. But then it never really quite pans out that way. You know?
Yeah, and I'm not saying apocalypse. I'm saying our government is going to fundamentally shift and change in some way.
That was the point that I was going to give you is, like, when I look at the timeline, you know, it's waves. You know, there's things are really good, and then things get really shitty, and then things get really good again. And I definitely think that, like, we are about to live through that time where, you know, why do they call technology disruptive? It's disruptive technology. Like, it's going to change the way everything's been done. Well, change is messy and a lot of times very painful and, like, ugly and nasty. You know, like if you want to get in shape, you're a fat fucking slobby thing, right? And you're just, like, sick, and you're going to have to go through a hell of a lot of pain and, like, misery. But then on the other side of that, all of a sudden you're, like, running 5 miles and you're, like, looking great and you're, like, feeling great and you're, like, doing, you know what I mean? So you get to this place, but first you got to go through the hell. And I think that you're right. Like, we're getting to that point where technology was fun and new and novel, but then it's going to start turning to, like, all right, well, now you got to deal with the hell of, like, reimagining society in this whole space. Yeah. And people will die and things will be, like, usurped, you know, like you said, governments will fall and things will change. And then on the other side of that, you end up with this, like, new era.
I always see it as, like, humanity's been like, the story of humanity is failing forwards and upwards. Like, we continuously fall face first into a better situation. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're falling and it hurts. But when we stand up, we always happen to be better or in a further progressed position than we were before. Like, not necessarily all the time. I mean, there were times where we took some steps back, but, like, it's kind of like that old investing saying, like, if you're looking for a long-term safe investment, put your money in the S&P 500 because it's going up. It just goes up. Like, I mean, yeah, some years it goes down, some years it goes up a lot, some years it goes down a lot. But I mean, if you're gonna hold it for 30 years, statistically speaking, you're gonna make 17% or whatever the fuck it is. So it's like, I feel like it's kind of like that. Like, when you zoom out, like, when you zoom in, there's all kinds of fuck shit happening all the time. But when you zoom out, it's like you just. Yeah, like, it's like we do it in our own daily lives. Like, our own daily life is almost like it's a smaller reflection of what humanity's story is in general, which is just like, you don't know what you're doing. You're constantly in these awkward positions where you're trying to figure it out as you go. And so you do things and you make tools and you make items and you think, like, oh, these are going to be great, and then they are great, and then you start realizing, like, wow, these are really fucked up. Like, we somehow managed to turn this really great thing into something totally fucked up, and then you have to deal with the consequences of how you fucked that up, and then you keep going forward. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, for the last 10 to 20 years we've been fucking some shit up in the background, and I think that all of those are going to come, like, all those chickens are going to come home to roost. And so we'll have to deal with that. Hopefully we will deal with it. Mostly what we've been doing is just, like, bottling it up and shifting it away.
My I guess dystopian view is that when those chickens come to roost, we're going to be dealing with something like fascism or a dictatorship or a fall of centralized, like,
are
democracy.
You asking, like, are we going to see the fall of American democracy soon?
In our lifetime?
I think so. I don't know about my lifetime, but in the next 100 years. I believe before
we ain't got 100 years left in America.
No, we don't. That's not, like, oh yeah, no. 2100. I do not see America standing as a free like the way it is now. I don't know if it'll be a dictatorship
it's not free now.
Or a fascist, like, or I don't know, but the way it moves and operates like it does now, like, that shit will not last. It just won't.
Yeah, I think
society,
it'll be
that book.
It'll be different. I think it'll be different fairly quickly just because things change really fast nowadays. But so I think that I'm actually really excited because I feel like national divorce is, like, legitimately on the table these days. Like, I feel like, because I think that we've learned from the 20th century of the kind of horrors that we can bring about to each other, I think we'll if I'm like being optimistic, I imagine that we'll avoid that and just come to some sort of like a mutual divorce. It's not gonna be like a easy thing, but we'll just be like, look, we're not fucking with you no more, and we're just gonna not fuck with each other.
How many mutual divorces you ever see out there though? Like it's very
Tons.
rare when people like just be like, we're going our separate ways, you know?
Well, no, I mean what happens is one person wants to go their separate way and the other person doesn't, and so sometimes you fight, sometimes one person's just distraught. It depends. It depends on how the other person reacts. So it's hard to say, but I think it's a legitimate thing that's on the table, and I don't think that it's going to be like Civil War type, Gettysburg, where 600,000 people start murdering each other with knives and machetes.
But wasn't that almost exactly the same situation? Like you said, you had one section that were like, we want to leave, and the other section was like, slow your roll, and they were like, well, no, we really just want to leave, and they were like, no, we think that you shouldn't leave, and then all of a sudden fighting,
and then they fought. Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, why do you think that we've progressed so much in human nature over 100 years?
I see it, and I see this as a real possible scenario. Like if you equate, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes once again. If we see a modern day Hitler, it would be someone in America who was talking about immigrants and removing immigrants. That would be the Hitler platform. So if we see somebody burn down the fucking Congress and march down the street with a mega army supported by groups of people, mostly white, who are against the immigrants, this is a scenario.
You think it'll be a race war?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know why you feel like it's gonna turn into something like is that what you like? Are you saying?
One of the possible scenarios that could lead to the downfall of our American society is if somebody really racist and white supremacist gets into the White House again.
I mean, I guess that's possible, but I just you think that that's what's most likely to happen.
I don't think it's most likely. I said this is a scenario.
No, but okay. Out of all the different apocalyptic scenarios that could bring about the downfall of the United States, would you say that it's the most likely that it will be because of some sort of Hitlerian white supremacist uprising?
I would say if you look at it more as government takeover, I'm saying it's highly likely. Now, the shape and form of that government takeover, whether it's a Hitler-esque go against the other type guy or a general that fucking has a coup, whatever it may be, I see government uprising as the 100% that scenario is likely to occur.
Mine's communism. I'm most afraid.
Going by the trends, I would say that we're much more looking at like a socialist, communist kind of disaster than like a fascist, like Mussolini type.
Right. One
Hitler
thing leads to another. I'm telling you, brother. This shit is all gonna. It's gonna be. Yeah, it'll go communist first,
and then some Hitler guy will come up and be like, "Fuck these commies, man."
Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's
possible,
but I don't think it'll be motivated by race, though. That's my thing. Is I think that race, in that sense, especially in America, it's just kind of. It's not dead.
It's gonna be under the guise of lack of resources,
but it's dying. There's so many. Dude, look at white people today, man. They're like, they care more about black people than black people care about black people. White people out here just
that's in your bubble though, because I can look at the East Coast and I think bubble
I think that's the bubble though. That's what I'm saying. Like racism is now the minority. Like I think that there was a time where racism was the majority, but slowly over many decades, and like I said, it's not been eradicated. People out here like racism it still exists. In small minority pockets around the country, there are still racism or racists. But I would say the majority of people out here, and this is just as growing up for 33 years as a half black, half white man, like I just haven't experienced it in a majority sense. I've experienced it in a minority sense. I've had people judge me or criticize me or be afraid of me. You know, I've had things, microaggressions, let's use that word, right? But anyways, I just don't see it being based on race. I do see it based off of resources or something like that.
And immigration. Those are the way that it's not about race. But if you make it about
immigrants, though, like everybody's an immigrant.
But if you look at the topic of illegal immigration is huge in America. So if that's let's say it's on an upward trend. Let's say it becomes
on an upward trend.
And let's say the Republicans become 65-70% of America. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
And they want to close the border.
They make it about, and this is anti-immigration. Now you can have something where it is somewhat motivated by race, but you don't have to come out and say it. It's whitewashed. It's 3 steps removed from racism. Just
But,
like
who are the
resource,
immigrants,
resource scarcity. It's like, well, we just want America to have enough resources for America. So if you're an immigrant and you're taking our resources that are ours as good Americans, you see how you can kind of.
But you see how like America uses mostly exported resources.
Look, I'm not saying it makes total sense. I'm saying that this is a scenario.
But I think that you're failing to like mostly as far as like I don't know, you're more in touch with like the like forum, I guess, side of like the right wing stuff. But like from like I can tell you like Ben Shapiro and all those people, like from what they say, what I hear a lot of like mainstream Republicans like Ron DeSantis say, like it's not that they're against immigration, but it's against illegal immigration. But they try to tie that to race, but there's really only a handful of people, like Finland people that want to come here illegally could also do it by going to Central America first and then coming up through the border. They just don't very often. And so it's like when you look at who are the majority of people illegally immigrating into America, it's a majority non-white population. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like non-white people. That's just what it happens to be.
Yes.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I just think that that's the other side to it. Like it might not be a race thing at all. Like it might just look removed from race 3 steps down because it just so happens that the people who are illegally immigrating, which is what most people care about is the illegal immigration part, they happen to be a certain population.
I'm just saying if I turn on Fox News,
yeah,
I'm going to see
something about immigration.
A lily white cast of the whitest white people talking about immigration and talking about closing the borders. And they're going to be showing videos and pictures, and all those videos and pictures are going to be showing brown people.
But are they saying anything negative about brown people?
I'm not saying that it is therefore racist. I'm saying that if we look at race is a factor in immigration. And when they put it out there like that, the people that really buy into that concept see the same thing as everybody else, but they interpret it in a way of like, see?
I'm not discounting your point that that immigration and all that stuff is a hot point, or like a thing. I think you're putting too much, like you think it's too big of a thing. I think it's like this big of a problem, and you're saying it's gonna lead to like
we're talking about we're talking about hypotheticals,
yeah.
And I'm saying that a government takeover or some sort of government uprising
based
into the
on closing the borders, though.
That's my bet. My best guesses are immigration being deemed the other and rising off of that, right? Abortion, I don't think has enough legs to cause an uprising.
I mean, I could see something around free speech, immigration, and like gun laws,
election fraud, Second Amendment. Like these are other things where if you put them all in
like
one umbrella,
that would be like a platform that the guy who ends up becoming dictator might run on, maybe.
Well, see, and I think maybe that's where I'm disagreeing. I don't think it's the government that does it. I think it's the people. I think the people rise against the government.
Political uprising?
Well, yeah. Well, just because if you really think about it, sure, Republicans like Republicans and stuff or whatever, right? But a lot of people are losing faith in government, period. You know, and a lot of people, it's kind of like when Mac was in here, he's like, oh, I'm optimistic because national divorce is coming about, right? It's that sentiment that comes from both sides. It comes from me. It comes from Democrats. It comes from Republicans. It's like this new idea that millennials and under feel like we have it all. I mean, it's literally on our board that we want to redraft the government. Like we really believe that what is happening now doesn't work anymore, and we have a better idea, and it's only a matter of time before that continues to populate through society. And I think eventually when they come down and they're like, oh, vaccines are mandated now, like you're going to get vaccinated, that it's done. It's done. It's off the rip right there.
If they start pulling people out of their house, checking
you know
their
what I'm
cars,
saying? Like if the government were to do one thing or two things that just oversteps that boundary, people are so brazened by what I was just doing that op-ed on, by social media. You feel like you got numbers now. Like back in the day, if the government was transgressing against me, at best I could sit on my couch and bitch about it to my brother. But now I could really get a Facebook group together, get 30,000 motherfuckers, and really feel like, yo, we can go after these fools. And then when they go after them, then Kyle Rittenhouse comes out and he's like, I don't like them going after my government. I'm going to stand up. And then now we have civil war amongst the people and the government has to intervene. And so I see it more as like a breakdown completely along everybody's own political lines. You know, you're going to have factions of like, well, I think this needs to happen. I'm fighting for this. And the government's trying to stop all of us. And we're all just at each other's throats. And then and then it'll turn into like an Afghanistan type situation. Like, let to the victor will go the spoils, you know, like whoever rises up top, whether that be the communist people or the fascist right wing people or the government, you know, quells it and maintains order. But I see it being like a massive, just like along all your own individuality.
Back to Red Dawn, because as soon as that starts happening and an enemy sees a weakness like that.
100%. Yeah, then China just comes rolling on through. Like, I tell you who's got this. We got this.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. You don't like what's happening with your government? The Chinese Communist Party got the party for you.
This is really
ain't no party like a Communist Party. You know what I'm saying?
25 years from now, we're going to be coming to you in Mandarin.
Because the Communist Party don't stop.
And they've been subverting that. Like you said, I think they've been playing the long game. And they're like, look, those bitches are spoiled. They're fucking, you know, entitled.
Stupid fat Americans.
You know what I mean? Like, just beat them.
You want to hear something interesting about the Civil War, though, is like we made a point about how the Civil War broke out because one side wanted to leave and the other side said, nah, you're staying. Well, what actually happened was like there's actually I say quoted, like I've read this in lots of different places, but I don't know for sure. Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, if I could have kept the Union together without freeing slaves, I would have done that. But he knew that if he hadn't done something about slavery, then the North would have done what the South was doing, which is secede. They were going to be like, well, look, we're not going to fuck with you slave-holding people anymore then. You're not part of our country. So, and he happened to be really into power, Abraham Lincoln. So he was like, I just fucking got elected as this bitch. You're not leaving. Like, I want, like, no, like it's not happening. I'm not going to let this shit fall apart right when I get in. So a lot of that had to do with it too, is something that I've read just from like his personality. But so it really wasn't like the North was like, I'm sure the North was like, good riddance. Like, we don't fuck with y'all. Like, that's fucked up. But because it was like you're oppressing those people down there, the government had to do something about it. Like, there were certain constituents that were like, look, we can't just step away from this. But I think what's happening now is like less of an intense of a disagreement. It seems more heated because we're living in it now and we only read about like how heated it was in this, like, but it was heat. Like, the discussions before the Civil War were heated. Like, it was a real big issue back then. Like, people got into fights. It was a whole thing. So it's like, if now we can have that same sort of like, we don't like each other feeling, but it's not necessarily over the fact that we're like one party subjugating an entire race of people that we feel like we have to go like free. You know what I mean? Like, if that's the case, then I think that we have more room for like avoiding a full-blown civil war. I'm sure there'll be some skirmishes.
That's a good point.
But I think that it'll be more of like a messy divorce, but not like a divorce doesn't mean that you murder your wife. You may have a messy divorce and fucking yell at her, you fucking bitch, and maybe you slap her around a couple of times or she fucking stabs you but you guys live to see another day.
I haven't even seen that though. I mean, like, dude, we're at each other's throats just over like the results of a trial.
Right, but
like,
I mean,
nobody's being oppressed or anything like that. But
how
then, like,
committed do you think that they will be? Like, at a certain point, they have to be willing to lay down their lives for it. And I just don't see that in how soft we've gotten. Like, Civil War time people are hard fucking people.
You make a good point, which is that slavery was an issue that people, like, owning other humans
it was like bigger. It transcended a disagreement.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, I just disagree with you on this.
And
exactly.
I want to give you guys a quick piece of history that I enjoyed that's not going to take long. So, Texas, you know how the top of Texas has that part of Oklahoma? Oklahoma's got that thing. Do you understand why that's there? Yeah. So that is there because of the parallel that when we were part of when there was a union and a confederacy, but we were still like all the union, we allowed slavery below a certain line. Allowed it to, I don't remember exactly, the 45th parallel or something like that.
Yeah.
So
something like that.
when Mexico owned Texas, outlawed slavery, and Texas was like, well, fuck that. We don't want to be part of Mexico. We want to be part of America. We want to be part of the Union. And America was like, sure. And you can keep your slaves too, but you got to give that top part to Oklahoma.
It's true.
Interesting.
So Texas doesn't go above the slave line.
The slave line, yeah.
And
exactly.
Texas said, we don't want this top piece because we want to have slaves.
Part of the Union, but
we can't. Yeah, we want to be part of the Union, but we want to keep our slaves.
We have to like draw our line here.
Yep.
And we're down for that.
So that's no more because Texas is your.
Because the Texas territory was massive. It took up
bigger.
a huge amount of land, like up from all the way up through Oklahoma into Louisiana. Like it was just huge, and then over time it just kind of got sectioned off. But that was one of the big.
But they clipped
chunks,
the top
yeah.
off. They clipped that piece of land off that because Oklahoma was a. Whatever,
chunk, yeah.
and they like put Texas on top of that and was like, yeah, but just leave a little off the top.
Just erase that one and just redraw
just let
that.
them.
Yeah.
We'll take that corner. We
Yeah.
don't need the rest of that because we want slaves.
Yeah.
And that was like pre-Civil War. It was like it just shows how this issue was like literally shaping the fucking country.
Oh yeah,
Like
It was that big,
yeah.
it was mad, and it was big for like decades. Like it wasn't like everybody just one day was
Woke
like,
up and was like,
yeah,
yeah,
man, like man, that whole slavery
They
shit
fought
is
it
like
out
no,
for-
it was a long time.
Social justice is different.
But like you
it's-
don't feel like coronavirus could turn into that type of issue?
I think forced
No, I mean, I think
vaccinations where people
forced-
are pulling you out of
yeah.
your house and jabbing you
Well,
could.
you
well, that's
know,
what I'm saying. I think at a certain
general.
point there's gonna be like some sort of mass. And I'm so looking forward to this event. It's like not even funny. It's gonna be some sort of mass like rejection of the rules or the little edicts that they keep passing or whatever. Like at a certain point, people are just gonna be like,
fuck no.
fuck that. Like
Yeah.
we're just not doing that
Yeah.
anymore. And I mean, we're already seeing it smaller and smaller. And as they keep encroaching and trying to take more and more, you'll only end up adding more fuel to that fire. You know, like there's stores now where like you're not allowed to wear a mask. Like in places where like it's like the law, technically, even though it's not really the law, where you have to like, there's a thing where you have to wear a mask. Stores are like, if you fucking come in here with a mask, we'll tell you to leave. And
Well,
so it's like
under-
already getting to the point where we'll just, and I think it's gonna be like that. I think like obviously there's be some shifting around that happens in the aftermath, but it'll just be like, we're just not gonna let you tell us what to do anymore.
Well, and then like you were saying, like, you know, you thought that there wasn't going to be anything that was as atrocious as slavery to make the other people feel like they had to fight against them. But coronavirus could end up like that. If the people who are afraid, or, you know, I don't want to call them afraid, but just who think that it's a detriment to them and their society that you're not doing X, Y, Z, I could see them trying to force you to do that. And so you being like, well, we're just going to leave. You know, like, y'all do y'all's thing over there. We're just going to leave. They're going to be like, well, no, because if y'all still don't fucking comply, then you're going to affect us. And so we're going to make you do it. And I could see that being an inflammatory enough subject that I could see the division and fall.
I mean,
It's
it'd
likelier than Mexican Hitler. Like I'll give you I'll give you that.
yeah.
I'll give you
Well,
that.
the inciting incident of coronavirus has already happened, so that's already like it's already like 70% of the way
Yeah, so-
further than the
Dude, they're
Mexican
starting to
Hitler
lock
thing.
down a lot of. I was reading was it Austria or whatever? They've
Australia.
No, Austria.
Well, there's an Austria one.
Yeah.
thing, too.
Oh, the
they
Austrians
made
doing
they
that?
made
Nice.
the vaccine compulsory, which I believe means mandatory, right? Like
Yeah.
they just kept using the word
compulsory.
compulsory.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
we're gonna. It's
Like,
compulsive.
Like, yeah, like you got to.
Yeah.
And they're going into lockdowns again and stuff. I guess they had lockdowns specifically for non-vaccinated people, but now they have like mass lockdowns, and people are like taking to the streets already, and like and I don't know. I mean, how free Austria is necessarily. Obviously, not very free because they can do that, but you know, it's already starting in other places, and it's only a matter of time before it starts creeping over here. And I could see
mean,
it going that way.
Could you imagine if we were part under an umbrella like European Union style?
Right.
Like
Well, that's exactly what we are. That's exactly what the United
NATO
States is.
and
Like
Union.
the EU specifically stole the model that the United States. It's a even more poorly put together republic of individual sovereign states. That's the whole idea, was that it's not the because that's the thing is when you talk about the United States, you talk about the United States, and like you think about it as one thing. But when you think about Europe, you think about it as being separated, but mostly being separated, but having this like small connection. Whereas with the United States, you feel like it's a much deeper connection. Like it feels like it's all one thing. And so that's not really the way it was supposed to be. Like it was supposed to be the way Europe is now. It's just that Europe has had so many hundreds and hundreds of years of being separated, whereas the United States has only been around for 300 years in total. So it's like,
and all the
that's
things
how
we
it's
want to
supposed to
separate
be.
about end up being things that like
federally,
like the government's like, okay, no, stop.
we can clearly
Stop doing
look
that.
to something just as recent as Brexit to like give us, or at least give me, like that Brexit gives me hope. I'm like, dude, if England, if the United Kingdom can just completely leave the European Union and nobody goes to war, nobody's like losing their minds. Now obviously we're a little bit more aggro than Europe, but like I think like that's another like white pill to me.
Yeah,
like, that makes me super.
They fought that out on social media.
They really just duked that out. Like it was, people said some fucked up shit, and some people got into fights and stuff. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they were like, "Look, we're gonna vote on it. If you want to stay in Europe, vote yes. If you want to leave, vote no." And so they did, and then lo and behold, they wanted to leave, and so they left. And I bet you a lot of people that wanted to stay in Europe, that lived in England, moved to different European countries.
You're probably right.
And so I think that that's exactly what will happen in America, or at least that's what I hope will happen, is like at a certain point, Florida and Tennessee and Texas and all of them will just be like, look, fine, do your thing up there. All of you liberals or whatever, whoever it is that ends up separating, if you guys don't like it the way we do things down here in Texas, by all means, go back to the North or whatever it is.
Like, I think that it becomes so much more radical if that happens, though. Like, I think because you're like, I'm excited for that to happen, but I'm just like, when Texas succeeds again, it's like, well, Texas just becomes their own version of a federal government now at that point,
right?
Know? Like they become the big brother, and so it's like, it's not. I don't.
But
really
that's the thing, though.
It's going to be any better.
Smaller big brother, and so the whole idea is not that like society is inherently tyrannical. Like you always have to give up certain things to operate in a society because you have to amalgamate with different people. And so the whole idea of the separation is that smaller groups of people tend to agree more than larger groups of people. And so having a governance that operates over a smaller group of people is, in theory, supposed to be less friction, like have less friction in the process than something that's a large, like trying to govern for a large group of people. And so if you can localize it down as small as you can, like if it were me, I think we should have like city states.
It's also
like Austin would be its own thing,
though.
And like Texas couldn't tell Austin what to do with Austin stuff because Austin's Austin.
It's also easier to manipulate, though. Like if you think about places like Africa, or I was just thinking about like how Pablo Escobar was able to become more powerful than the Colombian government, essentially, and that's a country. So it's like they were able to. This one person was able to amass enough wealth and influence that he had more sway in the country than its own government. How hard do you think it'd be to take over Texas? You know what I mean?
Think about Las Vegas when the Hoover Dam was
10
getting
times the size
built.
of Cuba, but
Well, I mean, like Las Vegas when the Hoover Dam was getting built, and the mob came in and stared controlling everything.
Right.
There wasn't any resistance.
Right.
So they just made a nice little tight little circle and boom, boom, boom. Now everybody's millionaires.
Yeah, the whole idea behind it is that it's not the idea that by somehow making the system smaller, you'll weed out bad actors. The whole idea is that the bad actors won't have the opportunity to cause as much damage as they could if the whole system was connected. It's kind of like we talked about with the energy thing. Like if you're connected, it's easier to help people, but it's also easier to have a domino effect where everybody collapses because of one group's inherent thinking.
I'll agree,
but it's
I got
different.
Point.
Go ahead.
Germany.
What about Germany?
Explain.
Well, explain Germany. No, but I mean, here you have a small localized government of Germany, right? And like you said, that was contained, right? It was the damage being done couldn't really happen on a greater impact. But then all of a sudden Hitler did do that. He
Yeah.
took over half of Europe and half of this other continent and all like so
him and Mussolini dapped up in the motherfucking
you're right. Like Texas could start with some type of fucked up government regime, right? And it's like, oh, at least it's localized. Until it's not. Until they decide they're gonna take over Louisiana too, or pack.
Or
Louisiana.
they link up with Tennessee
You know what
and
I mean?
just start taking out states,
right? And then now they get bigger,
Yeah.
and then they get bigger, and then they take over half the United States, and
then everybody's speaking Texan.
Well, I mean, you're just describing history. So, like, yes, states get big, and then they get small, and then they get big, and then they get small. So, like, I'm sure all of that'll happen.
Well, so I'm just like, why do you have this belief that if we get small again, it'll get better?
I didn't say it would get better.
No.
I'm saying that I would prefer it that way.
Okay, I see.
I'm not saying, like, I don't think that there is a better way of society. It just depends on what you want society to look like. And in my version, everybody gets to make their own society to a point until, I guess, somebody comes and wants to give you their society. And then you either fight them and die, or you fight them and win, or you fight them and lose. And so it's like,
You want to be able to
you
fight
really
it out,
won't
though.
be able to get away from it. But it's like, I'd rather have scary freedom than peaceful slavery. I'd rather be afraid for my life as a free person than just be peacefully benign in captivity and with no option to do anything.
But again, if you're running from oppressors constantly, would you consider yourself free? Like if you're constantly fighting for your life, I don't feel like I'm.
Well, I mean,
more
if you're doing well in the like, let's say you're part of the nobility of a dictatorial monarchy.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great. You'd be in like Flynn. So you certainly you certainly wouldn't want any sort of regime change in that situation. If you're not down with the king. So it's like, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, a localized system just gives me more choice about where I'm getting my shit from. But like, it's just how I prefer it. But some people want like a big world government, and they think that would be more better in their eyes. So it's like,
I worry about the more localized because, people get inherently like obsessively into the fact that, like, I'm a fucking Texan.
Yeah.
I'm from and I fuck with you if you're from where I'm from, but the damn Northerners or them damn whatevers.
Others,
it's like when you have like, because I was thinking about earlier, I was talking about before the podcast, we were talking about reimagining the government. And I was thinking about reimagining the military, and I was like, man, like having some local time, like how National Guard is. Like, I think all active duty guys should be around their home for a period of time, maybe the first year. Because in my head, it would be like, okay, you'd have like 50 states, okay, 50 bases, you have a localized base, you do your first year at a localized base where, you have a support system close by. And then you travel. But in my brain, it was always you travel. Because in my brain, to think of it as just, I'm a Texan and I'm loyal to Texas, or I'm loyal to this spot, this piece of land, it draws away from the inclusion of all the others, Like, it's not like, then you look at other people and they're not as much of the same thing as you are. But, like going to the military, like I was all about I had a North Carolina flag. I was always like, North Carolina represents me. It doesn't in any way represent me whatsoever. But I was diehard. I was from. I will tell you about it. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you all about it. I'm gonna tell you what we're famous for.
I remember we used to fight all the time about who was more south.
Yeah. But the point there that I'm trying to get to is, like, I've kind of divorced myself from this identity of geography.
Yeah.
I love the look and feel of North Carolina, but I'm sure I can get that somewhere else. If it was South Carolina or Virginia or Georgia, I could get the same thing. I wouldn't give a fuck if it was North Carolina or not.
Sure.
I just like the feel of a smallish town with grass.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's like, I know what I like, and I've kind of taken myself away from that. But when you build these small local things and you're like, I'm Mooresville proud, boy, I'm fucking from this diehard little spot, I think that you are less inclusive.
Well, let me ask you this.
Or become less inclusive as a culture.
Definitely happens as a nation.
If I have a series of questions. So let me just ask you beforehand. Do you think that some people are more inclined to be inclusive than others?
Yes.
Just based on personality or genetics or whatever it may be.
Upbringing or
but like some people are more open to other people than others.
Yeah, I don't think they're born that way. I think it's more so an environment.
Whatever, but like
epigenetics.
some people are more open to other people. Which is that something you agree with?
Sure.
Okay, so if that's true, then let me ask you, if you had a group of people who, if left to their own devices, were totally peaceful, they had their own squabbles or whatever, but they didn't bother anybody else. They just didn't like anybody else bothering them. Do you think it's better to leave those people alone and let them be bigoted or whatever it is that they think, or try to reform them by making them learn about other cultures and the beauty of other people, even though they don't want to?
Okay, well, you're kind of losing me here because, like you said, now it's a question of, is that hardwired in them? Like, are they just always and forever not going to fuck with other people? Or is that a learned behavior that can be unlearned?
But either way, if they don't want to learn it, I don't think that you have to teach it to them.
Well, but you don't see how it could be more beneficial to those people to learn if they just hadn't been exposed to it? Because
I can think that.
Well, because, okay, cognitive dissonance is a real thing. We talked about this earlier, and I told you, like, you're really big into this, right? Like, some people are more adverse to things outside of their own bubble already, right? And we really like to, even when you hear new information, you try and filter it into your point of view. You don't try and change your point of view. You try and change the information to fit your point of view. And so this is, again, human nature. It's not you, me, anybody. That's just how your brain kind of works. And that's not necessarily a good thing, though, right? And so, yeah, when people show aversion to new information, you have this guy and he's white supremacist, grew up that way, KKK, this and that. It's not because he's just never going to like black people, and it's learned. And then, yeah, he's going to show an aversion to learning that because now he has to unlearn everything he's already learned. But that doesn't mean that he can't, and it doesn't mean that it's not good for him.
But the whole idea is that whether or not he's capable of learning to like black people is irrelevant if he doesn't want to. So if you go to him and you say, "Hey, I think you'd benefit from learning about black people and their culture,"
and he doesn't want to,
and he says, "Fuck off."
Right. I don't think he should be forced, but I don't think I should just be like, "Oh, well, we tried."
So then what are you going to do then?
Well,
continuously try.
Here's what I hear you
So
talking.
then
let me interject, 'cause here's what I hear you saying. I hear you saying, if a group of like-minded people want to create a situation where they don't want certain people around them, then that should, in theory, be okay if they're nonviolent or if they just don't want to be like. Obviously, we don't have to bring race in it, so let's say country of origin.
Yeah,
you were born outside of the United States.
You like this football team? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm in Raiders Nation.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So Chargers not allowed in.
Yep.
Nobody else. You're not allowed into my area. Well, now, if you're talking about private property in America and all these private owners get together and like make a town, I don't know if that's allowed. But if you're talking about American soil, I have a right as an American to travel through your area. This is America. You can't say because I'm a Chargers fan I can't use your highway. You know what I'm saying? So I envision that not really working in the American concept as it currently exists.
No, of course not. I wouldn't do that.
Because you would infringe. You would just be infringing upon people's freedom in America. But I just see it like when you start homogenizing areas like that, or saying like Raiders Nation, and now you can't drive through here if you're not Raiders Nation, and that's like a thing. Then that's just a bad model, because now you're talking about if you have an idea that is detrimental to society, like we need to bomb the major centers of the economy to bring about a global Islamic jihad, and you can homogenize and keep people out and work within your unit in secret without outside interfere. Like, I can't travel into your area. Like, that's just recipes for disaster.
But like he said, though, that part of his thought experiment was that they're not violent and they're not trying to aggress outside of their territories. They're trying to stay within their own territories. And like this happens to like villages in like Papua New Guinea and the Amazon and shit, where we like every time we try and go around them, they like spear at us and like get the fuck away from us, right? And then we just kind of leave them alone, and they live in their own microcosm where they don't have any data. Like, they don't exist. They are completely in their own isolated.
Their child mortality rate would be much better if they accepted some of the things that we'd like to give them, but they don't want it.
They don't want it, right? And so it's all cool. I see what you're saying, and like it's totally cool. Like we kind of fall in the same category. I don't want you to force them, right? If they don't want to, I don't think you should come up in there and be like, no, you need to learn about this. Like, I don't think that. I think you should still continuously try to encourage them and all that. My problem comes and we've talked about this 100 times. What if your little bubble is the mouth of the Mississippi River?
Mm-hmm.
And you start doing all kinds of fuck shit to the mouth of the Mississippi River, but then that also travels all the way up to my little homogenous zone where I'm doing my thing.
Completely ruins your water.
It just
kills
completely
your fish.
fucks my whole shit, and we're just dying down here. And I have nothing.
recourse?
Nothing. I just have to well, it's because Raider
No,
Nation
no,
down there,
it's-
they fucking suck, and that's just shitty for us.
It's not that you have no recourse. Again, it's not a less messy situation. Some might say it's a more messy situation, but the whole idea is that when you spread out the damage, it ends up being less of an impact than if it's focused in one point, which is kind of like the idea of like a knife. Like a knife takes all of the force that you're applying to a very individual singular point, which makes it more effective. Whereas like if you were to disperse that, like a snowshoe is the opposite of that, where it disperses your weight across a larger area, and so you don't sink into the snow, you just ride across the top of it. And basically what my thought experiment was just that the idea of mixing people and cultures has good things, but it also leads to friction because not everybody's accepting of other people's traditions and stuff. And so it's like, yes, if they're open to it, getting out into the world and learning about new cultures can be extremely beneficial to people and to the societies that they live in. But if they're not open to stuff like that, then the idea that putting them in a position where they have to interact with people and create that friction without any necessary need seems dumb.
I am pro multiculturalism.
I want to change my stance on Mexican Hitler.
That's funny.
No, I'm just saying. Like, I feel what you're saying. There's friction, but also at the same time, like you're saying, like, oh, it spreads it out, but it's also not the equation of the same type of pressure or friction, right? So, like right now, under the United States, what's your problem? Taxes? They're taking too much money from you. Like. Whatever. I don't know.
Personally, yeah, that's mine. But I mean, other people have many
a vaccine or whatever. They took
demons in your media,
property.
astral world portals into the underground bunkers.
Like,
I mean, you guys are saying
government
all the
really
funny
doing?
things, but you act like the government isn't out here doing really fuck shit and ruining people's
no,
lives.
No, they are.
So just because the force isn't being applied to you directly doesn't mean that they're not applying it to people.
But multiculturalism has nothing to do with the government. Like they would be doing that under a homogenous.
Go to a
single
tribal,
culture government.
small government. It's death, though. Like I said, when you start fucking with my nation and we're over here and like I got this little tribe, you got that little tribe, and we decide we want to solve our squabble, the chances of us coming to a peace treaty table and talking it out is just slim to zero because just people in general don't really operate like that. You might try, but when that fails, you're gonna fight it out, and that's what nations do. So you can definitely assume that it's gonna happen on a tribal sense. But for a nation to go to war, like we hate that, and it sucks, right? But how many people died in the Iraq War, right? Like.
Oh, quite a few Iraqis.
I mean, a lot of people died in the Iraq War.
Right.
Like, I mean, what are you talking about?
Okay. My point is 100, 200,000 over 20 years, right? If you got this village fighting over this village and that village fighting this village and this and that, within the United States, even better to my point, how many people in the United States died when we fought a war in Iraq?
Very few thousand.
Very, very few thousand. But now instead of taking that and dispersing it outwards to the rest of the world, you want to turn that internally and say, now we fight to the death over our land and over our disputes and everything. And that you say, oh, it gets a little more messy. It gets a lot more messy. I'm talking blood in the streets.
If you revert back to tribalism, but that's not what we're talking about here.
If you look at it more as multiculturalism versus single culture homogenous like societies, I think the rate of violence for both of them is high, but I think it would be higher if our society was a bunch of homogenized, single cultural, like I'm this.
Well, that's intercultural violence, and then intracultural violence.
Well, I'm saying
those are two different types of violence. So that's two different cultures violencing, and then people within their own culture violencing.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that a multicultural system where you're exposed, even if you are not part of that culture, is better overall and leads to less violence.
Yeah, I know. That's where the arguments are the math is hard to crunch.
Yeah, there's no exact
I don't have the numbers, yeah.
But I would say that, a multicultural society where you're forced to not only include people with disabilities, with who are sexual orientations you may not agree with, like those things. Exposure therapy is much better than being like, I live in Amish world where we're all Amish. And if you're not Amish, you get kicked out of Amish world, because then eventually Amish Hitler is going to convince you that you need to go kill the other.
Others, right?
Or subjugate
but
the others.
That's the point. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
That's what government does. Government forces you to be nice,
Friendly with each
Part
other.
of society. It forces you to be part of society.
Forces you
Yeah.
to do it, because like you said, in that system,
It'll trick you, too.
It's heavily predicated on the idea that people are going to be peaceful, right? Like you said, that's got to be tenet number one. It will never work if people don't first come to this agreement that I gotta let people be who they are.
I gotta let black people in my my
like,
radio station.
or maybe not even let them in, but you gotta work with them still. Like, you don't get to just sever ties and be like, no, fuck you.
They get to marry our women.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
if I'm fucking up their water or something, I gotta be considerate.
I think that it's funny that you would assume that some sort of a metropolitan area with an NFL football team would come into a homogenous single culture, like
we're using that
these
as an
areas.
example.
But my point is that if it were to actually go down, Las Vegas would be the multicultural hub of whatever it is that you're looking for, and it would be the rural areas where it's easy to separate yourself. You already don't want the things that living with other people of other cultures could give you, like the access to an NFL football game if you wanted to watch it live. Maybe you're cool with it on TV because you don't really like black people or something like that. So you stay in your small town and you watch the Raiders on TV because that's where you feel comfortable or whatever the fuck. And so I think that in reality, like, yes, like the way when we talk about it, it could go in any different direction. Where it would be likely to go is hard to say. But for me, I think from what I've seen, I think it's a lot less violent than you would think, just because I think that violence is people are still violent, but I think that we've come a long way in the sense that we're at least now aware of our human nature, which is kind of like the first step. So maybe we're taking this national divorce thing too early or something like that.
Huh? Who's this we you speak of?
It's a collective we, maybe not. It's the editorial we.
Your point earlier was just that, like, the amount of people who are just getting herded around like zombie sheep is growing. So it's like, I don't know.
Who do you think is hurting them to be peaceful?
Right, those we collective that are aware of their human nature and consciousness and stuff is like a small group, though.
But is it not getting bigger?
Maybe.
I have my
doubts.
In my bubble, I know a lot of people.
I feel like sometimes I feel like it is,
and then you go some other places and you're like, damn,
a long way to go.
Then you stand in line at Smith's and you listen to a conversation between two grown adults for about 45 seconds, and you're like, humanity is
totally
dying.
fucked.
It's dying. It's literally dying in front of us.
Well, let me ask you this though.
On the branch.
Like Native American tribes all had their own forms of governance, and they fought within themselves and they fought within each other. But I would be interested to know what they would say about whether they would prefer to have that lifestyle or the one that we've given them.
I would be interested in hearing that as well.
I want to
like, would you rather have your tribal lifestyle and knowing that you might get into some skirmishes with another tribe for resources and land and all kinds of stuff?
We also raped and pillaged them, though.
Yeah, so it's like, or would you have what we wanted?
Friendly handed it over to them or included them in the process?
Well, this is the part that I don't understand about. You're like, well, I want to keep trying to introduce them, and I'm like, well, if they tell you to stop coming to them and trying to introduce them to you, like, if you keep coming, they might get violent with you, and you might actually bring on the violence just by trying to expose them,
and then murder them all and make them Christians. Yeah, let's do it.
A missionary or something. Sort of.
Like, well,
but
sure,
I think
that sounds like a great plan. Is that what we're doing? Because that's
human nature pitfalls.
It sounds like a plan.
So I think that, like, at a certain point, it really requires like radical tolerance of just being like, those people over there do some shit that I really don't fuck with, but they do it over there.
You asked me an either or. And I would say neither, and because neither one of those scenarios takes into, like, has come post-internet. Like, I want our systems of governance and our tribes, the way we govern ourselves, to be new and fresh and with the times. and we currently govern ourselves based on the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, all shit that's fucking old white man. You know, like we don't have anything up to date. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
the idea of do I want to be in a tribe like Native Americans? No. Do I want to be in a situation where it's this multicultural like melting pot? I mean, I'm kind of forced into it. It's where I was born. Like the only way to get out of that is to run into the, you know, go live into woods. And I don't want to do that.
Well, it depends. Like, you say that you want to change the way that the government operates now because you don't like it.
No, not necessarily that I don't like it. I think it's just out of date.
It could just be better.
Okay, well, so
Yeah.
it could be better. I mean, yeah, that's true. But I think that, again, like, do you think you'd have a better chance of changing a big government or like a smaller government?
Small government.
You'd have a better chance of changing a smaller government. Do you think that you'd have a better chance changing a government that has to represent people that are diametrically opposed to what you believe in, or people who are kind of think similarly to you?
Kind of think similar to me.
So again, like in a smaller case, like this is why I say socialism isn't bad. It just works on small scales from what I can tell. Like if you all agree on what you value and what is important, then socialism can work great. But if you start having disagreements about what people want out of the system, then socialism falls down. And I think that that's where all systems fall down, is that they have too many people with too many different ideas of what the system should be, pulling on the system in those directions, making it not able to do anything, really.
Our current system cannot pass any sort of real marijuana federal legislation.
Right.
It's at an all-time high in favor of. If you look at in-favored stuff, like how like 60, 70% of Americans favor things, none of those things are getting done. So obviously we need a new system or an update or something to take it to where the things that everybody wants for America, like some sort of public health care option that is not going to cause you debt, like some sort of
the whole point.
Marijuana legislation.
Just because a majority wants it doesn't mean that everybody wants it. And so, like,
yes.
if you want a public option, you should be able to live in a society where you can have a public healthcare option.
I
But
think-
I don't want one. So I don't want you to be able to tell me just because you got more people than I did to agree with you.
But if 70% of the Republic of America wants that to happen, then I think it should happen.
Well, that's his point, though. It's like he's saying, like, you know, that's why we don't ever.
That's
get
why
anything
we
done,
don't get anything done, because we're constantly going back and
over,
forth
like,
between who has enough votes to tell the government what to do. Whereas in
But my
my
counterpoint to your the thing when you're saying about that little thing, though, is that was the same point I was making earlier. It is easier to change, but that also means it's easier to change in a bad direction as well as a good one.
Absolutely.
So I just
the example of
so both forms of governmental control, large and big, have positives and negatives, and so you have to choose which of those sounds more appealing.
The
to
more
you.
we talk about it, the more I actually like the big government. You know, the more I think about, like, earlier you made that comment where you said, I gotta wear sneakers. No, you want to wear sneakers. Like, you don't have to, right? Like, it wasn't that the
I don't often.
Well, you
if all of our roads and everything was built on carpets, I wouldn't fucking
right.
So society has deemed it that I have to wear sneakers.
Before we built roads and all that stuff, like, right? Like, your feet was getting sore. Your feet was getting fucked up.
Yeah.
Out
Why
there
didn't
in
we
the
build
terrain.
carpets everywhere?
And like
because we had shoes.
Native Americans and things.
We made
they
shoes
were
before asphalt.
wrapping banana leaves and stuff around their feet.
Shoes
Like,
are
you've
some
been looking
old
for
ass shit,
a
dog.
way to protect your foot. But my thing is, things start off as solutions to problems, and then 100 years later they become the
problems.
oppressants. Yeah, you're oppressed by your
They're
solution
now problems.
Which technology, by the way.
Absolutely. That's what it is.
Solving now, 100 years from now, it will be our oppression.
Yeah.
But that just, I all of a sudden just hit me. Like, it just hit me now as we were talking, having this conversation. I'm synthesizing all these ideas together, and I'm like, why are we sitting around acting like government is such a fucking bad thing? And I was just like, oh, that's right, because we weren't there when it solved the problem. We don't know exactly what problem. Like, they didn't just come out of the blue. Everything was perfect and working fine. They were like, you know, we need a constitution and a government to, like, run. Nah, shit was fucked up in some way, and they were like, this is gonna solve our problem. 300 years later, you're oppressed by that solution. But which lends to your point, not that the solution's fucked, or it's just you need an updated solution. You
Yeah.
got different problems today. You got different things happening. You need a updated solution to problems now. So like where we're at with it now.
We need fucking congressional term limits, money out of politics. We need
We're gonna do a whole episode on it.
we need ballot measures.
You need blockchain. You need blockchain.
blockchain technology, like all that stuff.
All that.
And
for
it's our system is not working for us at all right now.
Nah, it's really.
And I don't think if we
antiquated.
were Native American systems, it would be any better.
It would be any better.
I think
so.
we'd be fucking killing and
Regressing,
raping.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. Is like
Because you also
it all comes down to which system you like. Because you're talking about like you want a blockchain in your system and you want these things. This system's working for some people, and they don't want any of the things that you're talking about. And it's like for you to be able to say that your system's somehow better because you think those people are sleazy, even though they might be. I just don't see how you can be in a position to say that and be like, nah, I know what I'm talking about. I got it. You're just a sleaze bag.
What if it was
I'm
a
gonna
collective?
do it this way.
What if it was a collective decision?
What if we just collectively decided to beat the shit out of you right here?
I'm saying like
That's a collective
well then
decision.
the two people who want to beat the shit out of me have overcome the person who doesn't want the shit beat out of them.
So that's cool?
No, I'm not saying it's cool. I'm saying
Well, then I don't see how that's
it's a
any
voted
different if
outcome.
it's 60 million people decide it.
because look,
Well, I just think
you're saying that inherently the majority is going to oppress the minority no matter what the decision is.
true.
What if the decision is better for everyone and the minority is wrong?
Then there wouldn't be a minority.
wouldn't
If the
know they were,
minority
though.
felt like it was better for them, they'd be part of the majority.
I'm saying if you're, let's take something.
If you could get 100% of the people to agree on it, then it should happen.
Let's take something that's like quantifiable, where it's like we want to get rid of soda, and 70% of America is like we're getting rid of soda, and 30% of America is like no, fuck you, we want soda, and then the 70% wins and gets
Literally
rid
the
of soda.
system we're
And
in right
so
now.
that's what I'm saying. It's like right
literally
now,
the
under the
system
system
we're
that we're
right
in,
now.
something that you love, like soda, could be stripped from your life because other people think it's bad for you.
It's true.
That's true.
And you
it's-
think that that's cool.
No, but I just don't.
I don't
think that
see
that's
what
cool,
you're
but I
saying.
don't understand how you feel like the solution is individualism. Like, like you're like, well, that's the problem. And so the problem is to just strip down that whole system to nothing and then let everybody make their own choices. But I'm also
No,
like,
I'm saying you make it seem like people are going to choose to be loners or something. They're going to group together. They're going to create their own governments, but they will be of creations of their own kind. They will be what they want them to be.
have you seen how people create religions?
Yes.
Like now imagine them doing that with governments.
That's exactly what I
Like,
want.
you're gonna
I
have
want you to be
Panda
able to.
Clown
I want you to
and
be able to. If you are you're a Pastafarian and you worship
Don't see
the
it working.
spaghetti monster. I don't give a shit. Dude, support the spaghetti monster.
Well, because that's my thing. When I talk about revamping the system and doing things like adding blockchain and all that stuff, right? Like, you're right. It's not going to solve all the problems. It's not like some magical system. But I do see it reducing the friction, right? Or at least streamlining the process, right? When you talk about stripping that down, like you even said, like back in the Native American culture, here's the thing about Native American culture and like back in tribal times. How many Native Americans populated the land at that time?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. So yeah, you fought, but very rarely, because you could go all the way to fuck over there and literally be in a situation where you don't have to. Like you said, you could be isolated and do your own thing. 350 million. We're already overpopulated and it's growing by the day.
That's not true.
It's growing by the
Everybody's
second.
trying to live in the same areas because it's easy to live in those areas. It's really hard to go to some place where there's nothing
So
at
who's
all.
gonna choose that?
Very little people. And those are the people that decide to live wherever it is that they're at with other people will have to make the choice to change their life to coincide with how everybody else is doing it. But my whole point is that, like, the idea is that if you want to be the pioneer that goes out to the new land or whatever, and you want to get away from this oppressive regime, it's going to be hard. You have to literally start from the ground up. And that's why little people do it, because it's tough. But like that's why I like that idea of like Tolosa. Like that guy was like, we're just going to go out into the middle of nowhere and we're just going to build a new city and it's going to be exactly like we want it to be, full stop. And I'm like, fuck yeah, do that, dude.
No black people allowed.
Whatever, dude.
This system is
Whatever.
enacted tomorrow. Boom. Dissolve. The United States is no longer United. It's the States of America or whatever the case. How and who gets to decide how Baltimore will be governed?
Well, Baltimore's going to have to figure that out for itself.
Right. How are they going to figure that out?
They're probably going to fight.
They're going to fight. So Baltimore, Philly,
But
New York, Texas.
When's the last time
Washington,
you woke
everybody
up?
fights.
When's the last time that you woke
and
up?
the winner takes all, and the
your
loser's
entire-
got to beat it, hit the road, and find some.
That's what I'm saying, though.
place to
You're
live?
bringing up this idea, like, if everything just disappeared, poof, like, that's not going to happen.
Well, but how? But you see what I'm talking about?
So it'll be a process. It'll be a process of you changing from one thing to the other.
And how? We talk about all the time, right? A plan is nothing, or an idea solution is nothing without implementation. And I don't see how you could ever implement that, because
You wouldn't. It wouldn't be a top-down implementation. There's no way I could explain it to you because it would involve trillions of decisions from billions of people doing their own thing. It's kind of like it's like a free market government.
But you see how that doesn't make any sense, though, right?
I don't. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Like, if I'm in New York and then they just start making laws and all that stuff, but I don't want to leave New York because I got just as much right. I was here in New York just when we started this, just like
Maybe
you were.
I own a piece of property in New York,
You know what
and
I
now
mean?
all of a
And-
sudden I'm
And
not
these are
allowed
all
to
going to
in
be
New York.
issues that you'll have to figure out.
Right. And how do you speculate it'll get figured out? If
I
you had to
don't
take
know.
your best guess.
I would say Big Daddy government steps in and fixes it.
Or there's no Big Daddy government anymore.
That's the whole point.
There's
Is
no
that
Big
there
Daddy.
is no.
So they're
there's-
gonna fight.
That's the whole point. Is that there's not going to be anybody there to pull
So
you
we're
out
gonna
of it.
fight.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't see how that seems to be a better solution than what we're already working. Like, not only is it not an improvement on what we already have, but it feels like 10,000 steps backwards. That we're all just gonna duke it out, and then winner takes all of every place in the United States.
Well, I think it's more like a process. Have you ever heard of it's like an analogy about a bottle of wine, and they talk about like the wine inside the bottle is like pain. And you can either take a little bit of the pain, a little bit at a time, but it's also accumulating as you go. So if you don't take enough pain at a quick enough rate, you end up with a bigger stock of it, more and more. Whereas like it'd be really good if you just like smash the bottle and take all the pain at once, and then you could be over it, like kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off all in like one quick motion type of situation. It could be that situation where like you have to go through some shit to get to the better side. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that was communism. That's exactly what they said.
That's what they tried,
Million
yeah.
people gonna have to die, but it's gonna be better on the other side.
gonna be
Trust me. I don't like it. It just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't.
Well, this is
feel
the whole
like
idea is that
it doesn't feel like a awesome. I mean, it doesn't even feel like it solves the problem that you were just saying, like the 70 versus 30, and like how do I help the minority be able to express themselves the way they want to express themselves? But in that system, you don't. You die for being the minority. At least in my government, I can wait another 4 years or get another chance to vote again or do something to like switch that around. But in that system, it's like I gotta literally fight to even hold any type of stake in my home because I'm the minority, and that doesn't seem like it solves that problem of minority versus majority rule.
You bring up a great point, activism. So in a kind of a homogenized society, like you can't really have too much activism, right? Like you wouldn't be able to like try to, I think we should allow those people in, or I should, you know what I mean?
No,
Like
because you don't get to decide.
yeah, it's no, we have agreed those people aren't allowed in. We're built on that foundation.
Yeah.
Well, so again, you have to make choices. So if you want to be around those people, hopefully those people let you leave. And if they don't let you leave, then hopefully you can figure out a way to like escape. I mean, this is my whole point is like, how do they figure it out? Like, I don't know. Like people figure out how to get out of North Korea. I have no fucking clue how they do it. Like it's an astronomically mind-blowing feat to me. But they figure it out.
But if we look at the 70-30 thing in a democracy, like, yeah, maybe the 70 makes a decision that kind of forces something upon the 30 that the 30 doesn't want forced upon them. You can then go out, use activism, use your voice, use protesting, use whatever means necessary to garner people to your cause. And like he said, 4 years later, maybe it's changed. Maybe you get it back on the ballot. Maybe enough people sign a petition. Like it feels like that system doesn't, like that we currently have, it's supposed to work that way, and it doesn't. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like feels like a fair way to deal with it.
It was supposed to go down.
And it was supposed to go down that way, but it feels like we've come a long way from the 30% feels subjugated, so they're going to protest and activate and come out and make sure that laws are enacted to where everybody kind of sees that, okay, this was not so good for that 30%. Like if you want to take civil rights laws, like that's an analogy that would work here, where it's like, that's a minority of people that were being subjugated, and they were being legislated against, and they activated, and they got out in the streets, and they made a difference, and laws were changed to ensure that minority is protected. And that was America, I think, working. But doesn't feel like it works like that anymore. It feels like that was the last time America had any sort of semblance of work, and it didn't even work. Look at the fucking the criminal justice system. It was just like, oh shit, we can't put them on plantations. Oh, we can't fucking put them in their own fucking rooms and segregate. Okay, we'll just put them in jail.
Yep.
That works.
Find somewhere else to put them.
Yeah, we'll just put them in jail.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah, you said I don't know if it's necessary. When I think about fixing the system or whatever, I don't really think of it as like shit canning the whole thing or anything like that. Like, I think that's my biggest problem too, is it just doesn't run the way it's supposed to run, you know? And that's what I want to see, is like just safeguards put into place where it brings transparency into our government, accountability into the government, like, you know, like
take the money out of it,
you know,
take the nepotism and the
dumb shit, like you said, like blockchain voting, so I could actually trust my vote. Like, you know, right now, where's your vote get tallied up? Who's doing that tallying of your vote? What the fuck is an electoral
limited
college?
Funding, no media like bias in your elections? Like, there's so many things that we could do that probably the majority of Americans want done that will never happen because the people who are in charge don't want them.
No, they don't, because that's the one thing that does suck, is that we live in the guise of a like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
all a clever ruse.
It is, right? It is. It's and it almost, you almost wonder, like, did they design it that way? Like, because you got to think too, like the designers were just like 75, how many, like a couple, like 100 some people. I don't know how many people were actually there in the meetings drafting up the Constitution or whatever, but it wasn't like everybody. You know? No, it was a group of guys, and they were like, "This is the way we're gonna do it."
You said it right. A group of guys,
old white dudes,
group of old white men,
landowning men,
and let me tell you, if you want to know anything about the way they set it up, they certainly set it up to benefit the people who were really rich and powerful at the time. That's exactly what happened.
That's true. Who benefited?
Now, the interesting thing about it all is like, I think, again, these people, like, you know, like, I can look at the founders from both of those perspectives. You know, not like the slavery thing, but like, well, I mean, the slavery thing too, but like even just removing the whole slavery aspect of it, like just them as politicians. Like, if you just want to talk about them as politicians, like, they kind of, like, again, they set it up in a way that they thought was beneficial for everyone, mostly beneficial for them, and they kind of falled ass backwards into this new system that improved a lot of people's lives. And I think that we kind of just keep doing that. We just fall ass backwards into progress. Like, oh, we slipped and fell into birth control. We slipped and fell into, you know, we just kind of make these random discoveries and shit. And I think that when those kinds of things happen, it's easy to point back and be like, oh, well, they had this kind of an intention and they had that kind of an intention. And it's like, we don't really know what kind of an intention they had. We just know that what happened. And it's like, I don't know why we put so much morality into it, in a sense that it's really more of a, like, I look at it, it's probably just because this is how I look at everything, but like, it's just more like a practical thing. Like, we can solve so much more of these issues if we just look at things like practically rather than and so that's why I think, like, practically, it's a good thing that we have laws like against murder and rape, and that women can get abortions if they want them. You know, like, I don't like them, but like, I like that they can get them. You know what I mean? And I think that that's why in a society that I would choose to live in, it would be a really diverse, multicultural, urban society, but one that just gives me the freedom to do the things that I want to do, but I'm not trying to oppress anybody else. So it's like hard for me to say how it would look if the people in that group wanted to oppress those people. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just because I'm not really smart enough to explain any of these ideas in a way that makes sense. Because, like, in my head, it makes sense.
That's why I come up with my own terms, Mac. Yeah. Neo-internetalism. That way you don't have to explain it. It's just a blanket term that means that you kind of get the gist of, that I don't have to explain. I don't have to lay out the core tenets.
Well, it's funny because, like, when people say words like that, instead of asking you what it means, they just kind of like, they don't want to look dumb.
their
So
own.
they're like okay, so like new internet, like a new internet age.
Yeah, like
okay, cool.
post-internet age.
Yeah,
okay,
so
like the modern era. Okay,
boom.
I think I get it, John.
Yeah, and
The
But
digital
they
world.
don't, though. In
But
their
but
mind,
this
they
is
have,
where all
like,
the
a
problems
whole
come
different
about, is that we
idea.
don't have the transparency and shit. The government will come out and be like, well, what happened was we had a case of internetalism, and then the reporter's like, excuse me, I'm sorry, could you go back? Neo what? It's a neo-internetalism. And so we just kind of, and then they just breeze right by, and you're like, does anybody know what a neo-internet? I don't know what that means. And
Now it's bad.
now it's bad. And so,
That's
yeah,
what I felt
mean,
like when everybody was quoting Despacito, and I didn't know what the fuck
No.
was going on. I didn't know it was the name of a song.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know what it sounded like.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the word meant.
Yeah.
Just Spanish, just a random Spanish
And you're
word.
what
I'm like,
this
why
going
is this
on?
hit the culture
Is this
so
like
hard?
a new political group?
Yeah, I
heard
was
about?
like,
The
is that-
Despotitos?
yeah.
What is this?
where Despacito's wrong.
Dead ass though. Like it was.
Yeah,
It's like that. It's like come again. A what?
I saw them going back and forth. AOC and who else was it going about woke? Like somebody was like, and they were like, only old people say woke and this and that. And then they were like, y'all told us. Y'all just gave us the word. Like it was the right using woke against the left.
Yeah.
And then the left being like, what? Only we don't even use that word anymore. Only old people say woke. And he's like, bitch, seriously? Like y'all just gave it to us 6 months ago.
Y'all
Like,
came
we
up with the
y'all
word.
were the ones that was like, yo, be woke. Like, all
Look,
this
we've
stuff.
moved on.
Yeah,
Everything.
and then, like,
we're
my
on
kid
low
tried-
key and bet now.
My
okay?
kid tried to hit me with this the other day. She's like, this the new slang. You're off. I was like, dang, I got unhip already. I was like, this is what it feels like to just get unhip. Like, dang, like it'll happen to you that quick.
I go
And
back to the
they tried
Chappelle.
to hit you
I go
with
back
that.
to the Chappelle's quote where he would make up the different new slang to the white people on the phone when he was getting off the phone.
yeah.
It's like, all right, Glenn, zip it up
and
and zip it out. Classic.
It's like, all right, zippity doo dah day, dog.
Zip it do all day, Dave.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
That's a great skit.
That is a great skit.
Yeah, nonetheless, I mean, it was a fun 2 episodes. We just
Just completely skipped the episode we were gonna do and did a completely
just
different
did
episode.
a whole 2 other episodes, but it was fun. I had fun. I hope you guys had fun.
I have no idea what we talked about.
Lot of-
really
lot
know. We
of-
talked about
it
a
was
lot of
good
different
riff.
stuff.
It was a good riff.
Just a free
It was
flow.
just a really good riff,
That way, yeah. I'm
I
just
I
waking up. from
Time,
it.
yeah, I just time teleported like
I just
3
woke
hours.
up. Where am I?
But, like I hope the viewers are just waking up with us. So they're just like,
Like somebody's just like waking up to their computer screen. They're 2.5 hours and they're like, "What the fuck did I just listen to?" That's funny. You just listened to the pre-show. That's what you got.
Yeah, that was literally an entire episode's worth of pre-show.
yeah, we do riff off like this like for like
Yeah.
a while before we actually start our topics.
It was a good
But,
talk.
Today's topic. Look forward to that coming. I'm not gonna tell you what it was. You know?
Check the
But
thumbnail if you want to know what the fuck we talked about, because Mac's gonna have to fucking dig us out of this one.
I definitely see it as two different episodes.
Yeah, because we
for
went
sure.
real political into the.
Yeah.
at the end there.
That one's gonna be its own thing. But whatever episode you're watching,
Tune in next time.
We definitely appreciate y'all, man. We love having y'all. We love these conversations, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Peace.